Welcome to this week's Chinuch Hashkafa message, Parshas Kiseitze. This week I want to just touch on two things. First of all, very briefly on a famous idea at the beginning of the Parsha, which has to do with Avodas Hashem in general and with particular relevance to Elul. And then go into one of the mitzvahs of the Parsha, which could be the basis of a very important discussion. A vort, which can lead to a very important discussion that we should have with our children, but also I want to talk about the parenting aspect of it, of how we approach these things when bringing up our children. So the first idea is just the first pasuk of the parsha, Kiseitze la milchama al oivecha, when you go out to war against your enemies. And the Mefarshim point out that the war here, of course, is not just the war against the physical enemy, but the war is against the war of the Yetzer Hara. Always important to acknowledge, especially when we're talking to children, that they have a Yetzer Hara. We all have a Yetzer Hara, and the struggle is on, and there is a struggle. But every time we find it difficult, every time we have a Yetzer Hara, we have to remember the vort that it says in the pasuk, Kiseitze la milchama al oivecha. It doesn't say when you go to war against your enemies. It says when you go to war on your enemies, al oivecha. In other words, you have to go with confidence. You have to know that when you go to war, it is a struggle, but you're already won. If you go with the right attitude, the attitude is that yes, Hashem gave me Yetzer Hara, but Hashem helps me overcome the Yetzer Hara, and I can do it, and I will, with joy and with simcha. Then Hashem gives us the koyach. And of course in Elul, that's a particular time to think about this, as we call Elul the Chodesh HaCheshbon, the month of Cheshbon HaNefesh. And yes, of course, there is sometimes a struggle that goes on, particularly when we're approaching making resolutions for the new year. We have to always remember Al Oivecha. That's just the first vort, and it's an Elul vort as well. But I want to go into another part of the parsha, which is perhaps a very, very important discussion. The pasuk tells us, Kisivne bayis chodosh, if you make a new house, if you build a new house. Ve'asisa ma'ake legagecha, you need to make a fence around the roof. The mitzvah of Ma'akeh, the mitzvah of protecting our homes from danger, not having dangerous things, making sure no one can fall off the roof, chas v'sholom, if it's a flat roof, and therefore creating a fence around that roof. The Mezritcha Magid explained this pasuk a little bit differently. And he said, Kisivne bayis chodesh, when you build your own house, I guess a symbol of building ourselves, growing, achieving, and so on. Ve'asisa ma'ake legagecha, make a fence around your roof. The roof being a symbol of yeshus, of gaiva, of ego, arrogance. The roof, which is the highest part of the house, that part of us that sometimes tends to be high, and the feeling of superior to others, and so on. Says the Magid, contain the ego. Protect yourself, that there shouldn't be ego and arrogance, because ego and arrogance, gaiva, is destructive. We know that arrogance has brought down so many people and communities and empires and leaders. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible thing. We all have arrogance, we all have an ego. But we have to build a fence around it, we have to contain it. We have to make sure it doesn't take us over, it doesn't control us. Now the reason I bring this up, and I think this is such an important discussion to have with children, because it goes into the discussion we have with our children about what does it mean to have ego on a very simple level, especially in the context of achieving and growing. We need to encourage children to be successful. Obviously, we want them to go to school, we want them to learn, we want them to do well, we want them to be good people, we want them to accomplish as parents, we want them to, and we get nachas, we get happy, we get pleasure when they do well, when they come back from school with a good note from the Rebbe, from the teacher, that they've done well, they passed the test, they were, when they get chosen to run a project in school, and so on and so forth. So accomplishing is a good thing, wanting to accomplish. We know that even the Chazal tell us, Kina sofrim tarbe chochma, that sometimes healthy competition, the jealousy among the wise brings wisdom, because sometimes, when there's a bit of competitiveness, it's a good thing. However, what often happens is, what often children tend to do, this is what we need to talk to them about, but sometimes they tend to do it because we mistakenly or subconsciously push them to do it, and we have to be very careful. So it's not just about a discussion with children, it's about what we do as well. We need to encourage success, but also encourage humility. And on a simple level, what that means is to build the middos of our children, to understand that being successful being good does not mean putting someone else down. Chas v'shalom. Being successful does not always mean being the best. Being successful doesn't always mean getting 100 on the test. Being successful means doing your best. The competition you have with yourself. Today in the school system, there's an obsession with children getting hundreds, getting 90s. Parents get upset when their children don't do well on tests. The mark on the test, and I hope the teachers will forgive me for this, is almost irrelevant. What is relevant is the child doing their best. Is the child doing better than they've done the week before, than they've done the month before? We need to talk to children about making room for others. Yes, being chosen to lead a project in school or wherever it is a great thing. But are you happy when someone else gets chosen? Are you able to make room for someone else? Are you able to make room and be happy within yourself when someone else gets surprised, when someone else gets chosen, when someone else gets called on, when someone else does well? This is an ongoing discussion. There's so many ways this discussion could go. But you've got to build a house. Yes, you've got to build success. You've got to build achievements. We've got to push our kids to do well, true, in a healthy way. But we've got to make fence around the house. There shouldn't be ego. There shouldn't be putting other people down. There shouldn't be a feeling of being better than others. We should want to do the right thing. We should feel good about doing the right thing. We should serve Hashem, learn His Torah, keep His mitzvahs, and do the best we can. And yes, we need to praise our children for doing well. And we need to point out and acknowledge the success and the effort they're putting in. But as parents, we sometimes make the mistake, and that's why it's understandable why our children make that mistake, where we almost praise the fact, not that they did well, but they did the best. That we push them to be the one to get the prize. We complain to the school. We get upset when our children aren't the best at everything. They don't need to be the best at everything. That is not a good trait. They need to do well. They need to build a house, but they need to be humble. We need to talk to children, but also talk to ourselves about how we are encouraging our children's success. To do well, but at the same time, make room for other people. That's the true meaning of Avos Yisrael. Not just to do a favor for another, not just to be kind, but yet think of yourself as the best. No, Avos Yisrael means to actually be happy when someone else succeeds, to make room for others. Not always to jump in. Not always do you have to be the leader. There's room for everyone. There's room for others. I think it's a great discussion to have with children, and it's a great lesson for ourselves as parents to watch our language, to watch the way we're talking to children, how we are encouraging success. We need to encourage the building of the house, but we also need to encourage the fence to contain the ego. Have a good day and a good Shabbos.